Hi everybody, it's Tim. In 2005, Doctor Who returns to our screens with 13 new episodes brought to us by showrunner Russell T Davies, and a scattering of talented writers. The episodes The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances are often seen as some of the best episodes of the show's modern run, and I think a lot of that's down to the show's main villain, The Empty Child. 15 years later, we were able to sit down and talk with the actor behind The Empty Child, Albert Valentine. Before we get into the interview, I just want to give a big hand to Albert. He took time out of his day to come talk to us for half an hour. Really solid guy. This is one of the first interviews Albert's ever done, so we were really keen to ask all the questions you wanted to know. So make sure you listen to the end for the fan questions and enjoy. So thanks for joining us, Albert. It's really great to have you on the show. First proper guest we've had.
No worries, pleasure to be here.
One thing that really struck me when watching the episode is how young you were in those two episodes. How old actually was you when you first starred in those episodes?
When people ask me that question, I don't really know what to tell them because I literally couldn't tell you. I think I must have been, maybe 7 or 8, I think. But I could be miles off. I think about 7 or 8. Yeah.
Yeah, we had you down much younger. We thought you were about 4 or 5. So yeah.
Yeah, for someone aged just 7 or 8, they really expected you to do a lot, considering.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've always looked quite young. I'm 23 now, and I get asked for ID all the time and that. So I look very young. So I think that one of the reasons why I probably got the role in the first instance is where I looked pretty young. As you say, I looked about 4 or 5, but I was obviously a little bit older, and I could, maybe take on them instructions probably a little bit better than a 4 or 5-year-old could have done. So that's probably why that was. So yeah.
Yeah, because that episode is, it's known to be one of the creepiest Doctor Who episodes. And I did wonder when it came out, was you actually able to watch it? But with obviously you being sort of the demographic of the show, I guess you were pretty okay watching yourself.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, a lot of my friends and family. I mean, a good friend of mine, his younger sister, obviously knows who I am very well, and knew that I was going to be on the TV. And when she actually see the episode, she was absolutely petrified and literally hiding behind her sofa. I mean, myself watching it, it's just. It's almost funny to me because I've seen sort of the behind the scenes side of it, and there was a scene where I'm going into the house, and when I put my hands through the letterbox, and that house there was not a house at all. It was just a big sort of wooden frame of the front of the house. And then obviously the people are on the inside, and it's just, for me watching it on the TV, I'm just thinking like, yeah, that's not a house, that's actually just a wooden frame. So yeah, it's hard for me to sort of feel the full effect of what it would to a person who's sort of not been on set, basically.
Yeah, I guess you sort of know, even though we only see what the TV screen sees, you know what's outside of that picture frame. You know that there's a sound guy there, the set ends about a foot in that direction.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of them things where you just, it's like I said, it's hard for me to sort of get sort of fully immersed in watching it when I know sort of the whole sort of special effects side of it, and I remember being on set once, and even the TARDIS, for example, obviously it's massive on the inside, but when you see it in person, it's literally just a huge sort of dome with the police doors in the front, and it's just, when you obviously watch it on the TV, it's just like, as I say, it's completely different when being on set.
So did you actually get a chance to see the TARDIS set? Because obviously your character in the stories doesn't actually go inside the TARDIS. Did they kind of show you around and let you see the inside?
Do you know what? I was, as I say, I was pretty young at the time, so I'm just trying to sort of remember it as such. And I was on a certain set. I can't remember exactly what set it was. And in order to get to that set, I'd have to sort of walk past the TARDIS, and you could sort of have a little look around. And I remember the green fellas with the long arms and the pointy fingers.
Oh, the Slovenes.
Yeah. I remember seeing like a polystyrene sort of cut out of one of those, and then like an individual arm separate, not with it, so, and that was sort of lying about as well. So I got to see that, and in the TARDIS as well. One of the things I sort of remember from there as well was sort of looking around at the components of the sort of middle mainframe sort of thing, and one of the things that stick in my head is that the little orb things that are on there, you probably wouldn't even notice it sort of on the TV, but sort of up close, and it's just the little orbs all from IKEA, and I remember just seeing them dotted around the whole sort of thing of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Obviously, the character you played, Jamie, he doesn't have much of diverse dialogue in the show, with the only real words he says are you my mummy? He's probably one of the most quoted lines in Doctor Who, but is it your voice in the show?
Do you know what? When I was actually filming, I was saying all of the lines, and obviously it was I know I keep saying it, but I was quite young at the time, and obviously the sets were, the majority of them are outside, so it's quite cold and windy. Obviously, I had the mask on. But as I say, I was saying all of the lines, but then when I watched it back, I'm pretty sure they sort of dubbed it just to make, because they obviously couldn't hear me where it was coming through the voice, and obviously it was quite a large set, so it was me to a certain extent, but I think they would have done something to sort of obviously amplify that in some way.
Did you know that you were going to be redubbed in the final show and it wouldn't be your voice, or did that surprise you?
I didn't, to be honest. No, in all fairness, at the time, I wouldn't have even realised when I was watching it, but it was as I got older and I sort of watched it, I went, hang on a minute, that sounds awfully sort of loud, and it still sounds like me, don't get me wrong, but it's you can obviously tell that there's been some sort of effects and something that's done after it in order to make it louder, really. So yeah, I wasn't aware of that at the time, but it's just one of those things after it, and they probably thought, oh, we can't really hear him properly, and then I had to do that, understandably. So.
Of course. So kind of going back a bit to before you were on set, I was just wondering, to get the part, was there any kind of audition process?
Yeah, do you know what? I was in a similar sort of time to that. I can't actually remember whether it is before or after. I was in a very sort of small snippet of it in, I don't know if you're familiar with it, New Tricks.
Yes.
And there was the scene I was doing in that, I was running down sort of this forest, and I was actually shouting "Mummy" at the time. And when I think back, I had an audition that I was sort of in this sort of small room, and there was a little blue chair in the middle, and they basically said, you've got to shout "Mummy" and basically run around this chair. And I'm trying to think, and I'm sure now I think back to it, I can't quite recall whether it was the Doctor Who audition or if it was actually the New Tricks. But I mean, the auditions and that they sort of vary, really. I mean, some of them are really quite straightforward. You sort of just stand there and they say, tell us your name, where you're from, how old you are, maybe a little bit about yourself. And then others, they sort of ask you to go a little bit more in depth, give you a little bit of a script to sort of read off. So in that respect, I can't actually quite remember whether it was that audition or whether it was just a case where I was just sort of, having a sort of a brief chat with them and telling them about myself. And I mean, obviously, in all fairness, there wasn't really much that much to the role itself. So it was more looking creepy. So I think it was probably more of a case of I just sort of introduced myself, and they sort of liked the vibe and my sort of look, I suppose.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you finally got the part, obviously nowadays Doctor Who is a show where a lot about what happens in each series they try to keep kind of as hidden from the public as possible. Yeah. When you got on the show, were you able to see the script for the whole episode, or were there some parts of it that they hid even from you?
I think I did see. Well, I see with the script I got, there was obviously everyone else's lines on there in those scenes. Now, I remember when I had the script, it was quite a sort of, quite a thick sort of document of different papers and stuff. And I'm not sure whether it was just my scenes that consist of, or if there were sort of other scenes amongst it as well. But again, I probably would have been too old to even realise, and probably even too young to even bother even looking really. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, you mentioned how young you was. So I imagine, especially with Doctor Who not being on when when you were up to the age of 7, it hadn't been on TV for like 15 years. So
yeah.
when it came back, did you know like the responsibility of how big this show was going to be? Did you sort of know that? And how was it working with like Chris and Billy, who at the time were like, they were big stars?
Yeah, definitely. Do you know what? I remember when I knew it was a big audition, because I remember my mum saying to me that it's quite a big deal. And I remember the time when I heard back from the agency, and they let me know that I got the part. I remember it as clear as anything. I was sort of sitting in the kitchen. I was sitting up on the countertop, and my whole family was in the kitchen. And my mum came in, and she was like, "Oh, that was the agency. You've got the role." And we're all sort of like, laughing and joking, thinking we're having a good time. And at the time, I didn't really actually know that much about Doctor Who. And my mum was sort of trying to describe it to me. And I mean, well, she actually sort of said to me that it's quite similar to Star Wars, and she digged out a couple of Star Wars videos for me that I sort of watched. And again, I wasn't entirely sure what that was as such. I mean, I was familiar with it, but where I was so young, I wasn't really, able to comprehend what it sort of was. So yeah, I wasn't completely familiar with what Doctor Who was as such, but I was obviously aware that it was quite a big show, just purely from what my sort of family had told me, really.
Yeah. Did you carry on watching the show after you'd finished in it? Because after Chris left and when David came in, the show became massive in the UK.
Yeah. I watched it from the start of my season that I was in. Obviously, once I finished filming, it wasn't out for X amount of time. And when it was finally on the telly, I watched the whole of my season. And I obviously watched my couple of episodes, and I think possibly another episode or two after that. And after that, I was sort of on to other things, and back being a little kid, really.
Yeah. A lot of the episode is set at night. I know you said a lot of it was filmed inside a studio, but was the night filming, was that quite challenging for your age, or how was that for you?
Yeah, the main thing I remember about filming, so it was all filmed in Cardiff. I had a lot of time off school, which at the time I was absolutely buzzing about. And so I'd go up to Cardiff in sort of, I think it was about a month interval. So I'd be up there for a month and maybe back for a month, or back for a couple of weeks. I'd go back and forth with either my mum or dad. The sets were, as you say, a lot of them were outside. And the main thing I remember, it just being absolutely freezing the whole time. And I had some yellow jacket that one of the crew gave me, and it was literally, past my shins. And I remember in between cuts, they'd come over, put the jacket on me. I'd be sort of standing there, freezing cold, and then they go, "Oh, here we go. We're going to have another take," and I bang the jackets back off again. But yeah, that's the main thing I sort of remember from being on set, is just being absolutely freezing the whole time.
Yeah, I saw some behind the scenes images, and it's like there's like a big sea of people all in these big coats, and then there's like a little kid in this bright yellow jacket that's just like buried in.
Freezing it was. I can't remember when exactly it would have been filmed, but it would have definitely been sort of coming up to winter time or around that time. Yeah, it was cold.
Apart from the yellow jacket, you also had to end up wearing a gas mask for probably about 95% of your time there. How was that? Did that get irritating after a while? Because I've worn one like in museums and stuff, and they're a nightmare. I can't imagine having to film in one.
Yeah, do you know what? It wasn't very. It wasn't necessarily uncomfortable by any means. I remember it had a very sort of distinct smell that I can even sort of recall from now. But I don't actually think it was I don't think it was actually a real gas mask. I think it was it was just sort of a reconstructed one made out of rubber with literally the filter bit at the bottom was literally just sort of a bit of plastic with some holes in. So it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable. Obviously, I'm sure you can imagine the old eye lenses were steaming up quite a bit, especially on the cold nights. But it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable. But as I say, I just remember that distinctive smell that I can still smell it to this day.
Mm. So, on the subject of kind of the props and the gas mask, obviously there are a lot of actors who, once they go on a big show like Doctor Who or Star Wars, they often manage to, say, keep something like a piece of costume or a prop. Did you get a chance to keep anything from your time on the show?
Yeah, I'm sure it won't matter now, but there was a gentleman there. It was the nicest bloke, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell you his name now because I haven't got a clue. But it was a really nice chap. He really looked after me on set, and I remember once we'd finished filming, we sort of had obviously all the caravan type. Sets that we'd all be in with hair and makeup and whatnot, and we'd finished filming. We was in there, sort of said goodbye to everyone, off walking to the car with my mum, and this chap with, as I say, I can't remember his name, but a lovely fella. He had long hair with a great big beard, and he come out to me and said, "Oh yeah, take the mask with you," and I had the gas mask with me, and I think there may have been a couple of them, but I had a gas mask with me, and do you know what? It breaks my heart to this day because I wish I could, but I moved probably a few years after filming, and for the life of me, I have no idea where the gas mask has gone. I've lost it completely, so I'm a bit glad about that. But,
The follow-up question to that was going to be, go and get the gas mask.
honestly,
Yeah.
I wish I could. Honestly, yeah. So it breaks my heart the fact I haven't got that anymore because it's quite obviously for me as well. It's really quite nostalgic, and as I say, that smell of it that would definitely bring back some memories. But yeah, it's a real shame.
Before you lost the gas mask, did you ever get a chance to, say, reprise a role for like a Halloween party or anything like that? Because you'd win trick or treating if you dressed up as the empty child.
Yeah, do you know what I did? I had I think it must have been like a one of those book days that you get at school, and I did rock up to school once in my the full get up. I mean, at the time, it wasn't a massive deal to a lot of the kids in my school. I mean, they definitely was quite impressed that I was on the telly, but not a lot of my friends were sort of really interested in Doctor Who as such. But I remember sort of sitting there in assembly, and my head teacher's up there sort of talking and saying whatever he's saying, and he sort of sat there and he's looking around at everyone dressed up, and I'm sitting sort of up near the front, and he sort of looked at me and pointed and just sort of chuckled to himself, and yeah, that was the only time I've really put the costume back on, really.
That must have been petrifying for your poor head teachers, looking to a crowd of people dressed up as, I imagine,
Probably
So you talk about how obviously there were kids who knew that you were on telly after the episode came out, and how that was they thought that was pretty cool. Were you able to tell anyone about what happened in the episode before it came on TV, or did you have to kind of, you or your family have to sign some kind of thing where you promise not to tell anyone about the episode?
Do you know what? That's a good question because I can't actually remember, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure they would have mentioned, or probably they would have mentioned to my parents, and my parents would have definitely sort of relayed it over to me. But again, as I say, where my friends wasn't necessarily massively interested in Doctor Who, I didn't really have sort of much sort of desire to spill the beans to them and let them know what happened, because they probably wouldn't have had much interest anyway. But yeah, most definitely, there probably was some aspect of my parents telling me not to say anything, but as I say, where we sort of wasn't really none of my friends were sort of watching it, religiously at the time, so it probably didn't come into a factor as much, really.
Yeah. One thing that's quite notable about the Empty Child and Dr. Dance's episodes is that there's quite a heavy use, especially for that time, of kind of special effects, like the big CGI London, the kind of special effects used kind of on the mask and the masks coming like out of people's faces. Were there a lot of scenes where you in particular had to act against special effects, and was that particularly challenging?
Yes, the time where we had to sort of take that into consideration and was acting when there wasn't anything there is in the last scene, when they're sort of when Christopher Eccleston is trying to get the gas mask off me, and I'm sure you guys would probably be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but the nano bites or something like that, the little yellow things.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things were all flying around, and I can remember they sort of said to me like, "There's, just look around as if you're sort of really shocked." So I'm sort of looking around with my mouth open and staring into absolutely nothing. But that was the only time that I really that there was anything that was, I was sort of acting when there wasn't necessarily anything there. But yeah, no, that was good fun actually, that last scene.
You mentioned just now that obviously in that scene you were acting with Christopher Eccleston, and you had scenes with him and Billy Piper. And I can't remember, did you have scenes with John Barrowman as well?
Yes, there was a scene where there may have been more, but one that I distinctly recollect is when I think we're in like a hospital of some sort, or a big building, and John Barrowman, Billy Piper, and Christopher Eccleston are on the other side of, and there's a polystyrene sort of cut out there, and they said to me that I need to, bang through this polystyrene cutout. And obviously, when it was the original take, it was, it was actually a brick wall there that I was banging through, and once I banged through that, there was all, on the other side of that wall.
So did you interact with any of those kind of three, still to this day, pretty big actors? Much kind of in between takes or anything?
Yeah, a little bit. Obviously, we was all doing. Billy Piper especially. When we was doing our sort of hair and makeup, she was next to me quite a lot of the time. Getting her hair and makeup done. I can't remember so much with John Barrowman as such. I remember my dad actually saying, obviously he was taking me up back and forth to Cardiff, and I can remember he said to me that there was a few nights where once they'd finished filming, I'd be tucked up in bed and he'd go out for a few beers then in the hotel with Christopher Eccleston.
No way.
Yeah, obviously, where I was a little bit younger, it's one of them things where I've not really got much interest in talking to adults. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, that's fantastic. We do have a couple of fan questions to end it on. Juliet wants to know, is your role in Doctor Who your go-to icebreaker when meeting new people?
Do you know what? I'm very sort of humble in that respect. I am very little people, or a small amount of my friends actually even know. I mean, if I've known people for a sort of long time and it comes up in conversation or something like that, or one of my other friends maybe tell them. But I mean, I was just talking to a couple of my friends earlier, and I mentioned that I'm going to be doing this podcast, and I said, I've got a podcast to do later, and he said, a podcast? What's that for? I was like, oh, for Doctor Who. He's like, Doctor Who? I was like, yeah, from when I was younger. He was like, what? You was in Doctor Who? And he literally didn't have a clue that I was in Doctor Who, and he jumped straight on Google, sort of seeing, looking at my episode and stuff like that. So, yeah, in with regards to that, as I say, I don't really, it's not something that I tend to not boast about, because it's probably the wrong word, but it's just not something that I necessarily, bring up in conversation as such, really.
Yeah. Warren wants to know, there's a lot of children in this episode. It's one of the only episodes of the first season that features a lot of kids, actually. Warren wants to know, what was it like? Was there good treatment of the kids? Did you get to spend time with the other children on the set?
Do you know what? I didn't actually, to be honest. No, I mean, obviously I see them around on set, but I think where my particular role was very much sort of independent and isolated from everyone else. I wasn't necessarily sort of hanging around with the other kids on set that much. I mean, as I say, I was definitely sort of seeing them about and stuff, but yeah, I wasn't necessarily sort of interacting with many people on set, apart from my yellow jacket. That was about it, really.
Wow.
I feel like we need to find the yellow jacket more than we need to find the gas mask.
It's out there somewhere. It's got to be digged out somewhere.
And our final fan question is one from Bianca, which asks, do you remember what direction you were given for the role?
I mean, where, I know I've said it before, but where it was such a sort of, there wasn't necessarily much to it. It was more of a case of just sort of, right, you sort of stand there and then, say sort of this line, and then if you want to come over there, put your put your hand on the window. And actually, I remember now. I think about that. I remember when I was going back to when I was saying about the building there actually just being like a wooden frame. I can remember when I put my hand on that window, it was like a plastic film, and I remember I was putting my hand on the window and I was pushing too hard, and I kept pushing the sort of window, and it was bending in, and I was like, no, just sort of touch it very softly so it doesn't bend and break. Yeah, it was as I say, where it's quite a sort of straightforward role as such, it was more of a case of just sort of do this.
It's very kind of
do it really
practical. Yeah.
Sorry?
It was very practical direction.
Yeah, of course. It was literally just, point and do, basically. Do you know what? One thing I thought is actually quite another scenario that was actually quite funny. That again, it's just coming to my head in the last scene with Christopher Eccleston, and he's climbing on the bomb. I've just taken my in fact, I might have just been before taking my mask off. He climbs on the bomb, and he's climbing up these steps, and he's literally just flew the whole way off it, banged his shin on the steps on the way down, and we're out of action for a good half hour whilst he's sitting there sort of recovering. But yeah, that was a well, it sort of wasn't funny at the time, but it was, you're able to laugh a bit after.
Falling over for Eccleston seems like a reoccurring thing. When he was doing Hamlet,
you know what? He's a lovely bloke, Christopher Eccleston. Yeah, he's a great actor, and I remember him being a really nice chap on set. He's a nice guy.
I know his opening night of Hamlet, he fell off the stage during that as well.
Really?
So, yes.
Well, there you go. He must have a tendency of falling off things.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Albert. It's been absolutely great to have you on. It really has.
No worries. My absolute pleasure.
Brilliant.
Thank you
so
very much. Cheers.
No
thank
worries.
You.
You take care, guys. Nice speaking to you. See you later. Bye.
See ya.
And there you have it. That was our interview with Albert Valentine, who played Jamie, the empty child in The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. I just want to repeat myself from the start. A really big thank you to Albert. He took time out of his day to come talk to us. Really nice, gave us lots of fun stories. And I hope we can do stuff with him again in the future. If there's anybody you would like to see his interview, do leave a comment and let us know, and we'll see what we can do, because we really want to get some really fun guests on here to chat to. But right now, it's hard to see how we can possibly stop that.